Who is the man in linen in Daniel's chapter 10 and chapter 12? I've been wondering that for quite a while. And every day before I read the Bible, I say a prayer where I ask God for wisdom and understanding so that I can understand his words and come closer to him. And I had this realization the other day, which I want to share with you today. I put together a short presentation, a deeper dive to go into it. And, one of the first things I want to start off by saying is that this is not, a salvation issue. I think sometimes what we often do is whenever we come across someone and we disagree with them, we end up butting heads and, saying negative things about each other. And I would refrain, I like to refrain from doing that. And I also would ask that you give me a little bit of grace as well. So if you do disagree with me, leave it in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I wanted to share this with you just in case you're having the same thought process. And additionally, I've seen a lot of people throw out some wild views over the past couple of weeks. So hopefully this can help to be edifying for you. So the safest response, what I want to start off by saying is that we actually don't know. And we're going to get into that in a bit because in Daniel's 10 and 12, it doesn't explicitly tell us who the man in linen is. And people have given a couple of guesses, and they'll say it's Gabriel, because Gabriel made himself known to Daniel earlier. People will also say that it's Michael. Jesus, which is going to be my argument today. I actually believe that this is a pre-incarnate form of Christ. And I'm going to give my 6 reasons why. And one of the funniest ones that I've seen recently is Trump. As you see in Daniel's chapter 12, the man in linen raises his hands to the sky above the waters, and he says that it'll be for time, times, and half a time. And people online have said that this seems like Trump's inauguration and that Trump will be in office for 3 or 3.5 year period. If you're watching this and you believe this is Trump, I want to say that you're in a very unique boat. No, I don't believe this is Trump. I'm going to make the argument that it's Jesus, and I'm going to give you 6 reasons why, but I wanted to include that because I thought it was actually kind of funny. So the agenda today is we're going to look through the scenes that are occurring between Daniel's chapter 10 and 12. And then we're going to look at my argument, which is going to be rooted in 6 points. So let's take a look at the scenes, which is based around my theory. So I'm going to take you through the verses and highlight my theory as we're going through it. So the scene starts off in Daniel chapter 10, and it took me a long time to get this AI right. I don't know if any of you guys have used AI in the past, but this thing is finicky. We're not there yet. But here we are right now. You see Daniel here, and then you see the man in linen over here, right? So let's go right into it. Now, on the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with the gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the man who were with me, so there were other men who were with him, did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so they fled to hid themselves. So the men that were with Daniel went and they ran away. Therefore I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength. Yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. So he describes the scene, and as you can see, the man in linen appears. Daniel loses his strength, right? The vision is starting. His friends run away. And what happens next, according to my interpretation, is that an angel appears to him, right? A separate person. A lot of people oftentimes assume that what happens next occurs because of the man in linen here in the white. But I'm making the argument right now that a separate person comes into the scene. Here we go now. Suddenly, a hand touched me. And when I read this, I was like, oh, this seems like a different person, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, "O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you." While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. Then he said to me, "Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia." So what he's saying is that, Daniel, when you started crying out, I immediately came to help you. But I was delayed because this prince of the kingdom of Persia, which we believe is a spiritual power, delayed him from getting there. So, because he was by himself, Michael, the angel, came to assist this other person. Now we're at verse 14. "Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the later days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come." And when he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. And suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips. And then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to him that stood before me, "My Lord, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have retained no strength. For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord? As for me, no strength remains in me now, nor is any breath left in me." Then again, the one, having the likeness of man, touched me and strengthened me. And he said, "O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be to you. Be strong. Yes, be strong." So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." Then he said, "Do you not know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince." So what happened is Daniel is weak. This person touched him twice to restore his strength. And he's saying that this man, who I'm now just going to call an angel, just for simplicity. So the angel says, "I have to go back to go fight." And that, Michael has been helping me in this fight. So again, we have the scene where we see the man in linen, and then you see the guy in blue, who I'm saying is a separate angel. He's the person that touches Daniel twice, helps to restore his strength, right? So now we're going to jump to Daniel 12, because Daniel 11 is a really long vision, and Daniel 12 resumes from where Daniel 10 left off. And in Daniel 12, we see two more figures introduced. You notice in the background, I added two people in the background. You can see them in white here in the background. And you kind of see this guy right here on the left-hand corner yelling out to the man in linen. "Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank and the other on that riverbank." So one on one side and one on the other. "And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" Here's the most important parts. "Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it shall be for times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished." So the guy in the riverbank yells to the man in linen, "How long will this be?" Then the man in linen raises both hands to heaven, and then he proceeds to swear or to take an oath. And then we're in verse 8. "Although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, My Lord, what shall be the end of these things?" And he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,300 335 days, but you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. So this was the completion of that scene. So again, the man in linen, the two people in the background that appeared. I still believe that the angel is still next to Daniel. He was just seeing two additional figures. And then when the man over here on the riverbank yelled out to the man in linen then responded. So here are my arguments, right, for why I believe the man in linen is Jesus. And essentially, my argument is rooted in 6 points that we're going to quickly go through. I'm going to talk about the elaborate description, that I believe that they're different persons and that Michael seems to be absent from the scene. I'm going to speak about hovering over the waters, the oath, how there's parallels to Paul's experience in the New Testament. And then probably the most important point are the similarities to Jesus in Revelation. And from that, we're going to look at some of the core arguments that the core argument I'm going to make, and then some counter arguments that people online have made. So let's look at my first point, which is the elaborate description. We never see such elaborate descriptions of angels. And why would that occur? Why doesn't that happen? And I believe that the primary reason is because God doesn't want us worshiping angels, right? So in Daniel 10, which is what we just read, it said the man in linen, his body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. That's a very elaborate description for someone. It's very specific for a reason. And the last time an angel was described in such a matter was in Ezekiel when it was describing Lucifer. So in Ezekiel it says, "You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The sardius, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the turquoise, and emerald with gold. The workmanship of your timbrels and pipes was prepared for you on the day you were created. You're the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You are on the holy mountain of God. You walk back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You are perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you." So they're talking about Satan here. "By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones." It sounds like the devil was, or Lucifer in this case, was a very beautiful angel before the fall, right? And I think that one of the reasons it goes into such detailed emphasis regarding his description is to show the pride that he probably had from his beauty, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons that he had pride and jealousy and all these other things that came about. But the point is that God doesn't want us worshiping any other beings. So this elaborate description of the man in linen is provided for a reason. So that's my first reason why I believe that it's Jesus. The second is that I believe this is a different person. I believe in Daniel chapter 10, there are two totally distinct persons in Daniel chapter 10, and that Michael seems to be absent from this scene. So when you read the text slowly, you recognize subtle shifts that occur, and this person seems to be different than the man in linen. So again, in verse 10, "Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands." And when I read this recently with like fresh eyes, I noticed this change. I was just like, you imagine like you're reading a script for a movie, or even that you're watching a movie. It's almost like he's looking at the man in linen, and then the perspective shifts just a bit, and then he's presenting new information from a different angle. And that's the way that I viewed it. And a lot of commentators that I've seen also agreed, because I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't crazy for thinking this. And then it goes on to say, he had trouble, I wrote that he had trouble reaching Daniel until Michael helped him. So the angel says to Daniel, "I had trouble reaching you until Michael came." But we know that Jesus would never say such a thing. Jesus doesn't need help, right? Because Jesus has all glory, power, dominion, everything, all authorities underneath him. So, or under him. So he wouldn't have trouble overcoming any demon that would try to get in his way. So that means that there must be two different beings involved. So I don't believe that the man in linen is Michael either, right? So it says, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. So again, reiterating that this guy that's talking to Daniel was withheld. And yeah, my point is that there seems to be a separate person talking to Daniel now. And now this angel, he says he's now describing that he has to go back and help. And my question is why? He's like, I have to go back. And the reason why I've come to the conclusion that he has to go back is it seems like he left Michael by himself. So Michael helped to clear the way for him to arrive. Michael stayed behind, right? And now this new angel is delivering this message to Daniel. And now he says to Daniel, and now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come. So he's going back to fight, possibly to help Michael to do battle. So that's my second reason. My third one is it seems like the man in linen, he's standing on the water. So at verse 7, it says, and this is in chapter 12, then I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river. So he's either hovering or flying on the waters, but it sounds like he's standing on the waters. So my question to you is, who else walked in the waters, right? So when you look at Matthew, now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. This is something that Jesus does, right? It shows his complete dominion over all of nature, over all of creation. And this angel seems to be doing the same thing. For number 4, the man in linen takes an oath. So he takes a mighty oath and swears. So in verse 7, he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever. This is a powerful oath, right? This is not something that one does lightly unless you have the authority to do it. Because we learned that we shouldn't do these things. And the reason that we shouldn't do these things is because we don't have the power. We don't own these things. These things belong to God. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 34, Jesus is saying, but I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, but you cannot make one hair white or black, because you cannot make one hair white or black. Because we don't have the power. We don't have the authority. We don't own these things. So Jesus is like, don't do any swears. So who can do such an action? The scripture says the person that can do it is God. God can make this type of oath. So in Hebrews, we see, this is Paul writing, for when God made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself. So when God made a promise, when he says, I swear, he says, I swear to myself. He swears by his name. That's a mighty thing to do. And then Deuteronomy 32:40, this is God talking. For I raise my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever. So this is a description of God swearing. So he's describing that he raises his hand to heaven, and that he said, and he swears by his, essentially by his own title, as I live forever. So if the man in linen is Jesus, he would have the authority to take such an oath on top of the water. Number 5, there's a lot of similarity, a lot of parallels to Paul's experience that we see in the New Testament. So Daniel is weakened by this encounter, and the people that were with Daniel did not see the vision. So in verses 7 to 8, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, right? So that establishes that. But a great terror fell upon them so that they fled and hid themselves. Therefore, I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me. For my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength. So again, he was weakened by this encounter, and the people that were with him hid, but they did not see the vision. And a similar situation happened to Paul. So Paul on the road to Damascus, this is when he saw Jesus for the first time in Acts. As he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly a light shone around him from heaven. Then he fell to the ground. So this is Paul falling to the ground, and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? If you don't know, Saul's name was changed to Paul later. And he said, Who are you, Lord? Then the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. So he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Then the Lord said to him, Arise and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. And the men who journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no one. So again, you start to see the parallels of Paul being weakened, the men being with him, not seeing anything. They were speechless. So there's a lot of parallels there between the two. And then lastly, there's a lot of similarities. And this one is going to take a little bit longer to go through because I'm going to share a counter argument in a moment. There's a lot of similarities to Jesus in Revelations, very similar descriptions. So Daniel, his body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. Now in Revelation, they're describing Jesus, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet and girded about the chest with a golden band. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice is the sound of many waters. So they're very similar descriptions with some slight differences. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at those differences from the counter argument perspective, because I'm never trying to prove myself right. I'm very curious to see what other people think and to see, well, is there a way to reconcile the areas that I might be wrong about, right? So this is an article or a comment from Bible hermeneutics. A person asks, who is the man in Daniel's vision in Daniel 10? And someone left a great comment here, and I'm going to read a good chunk of it. So bear with me. Although many sources claim otherwise, it is clear after examining the scripture that the man whom Daniel encounters is not Jesus Christ. When people compare Daniel's vision of this angel to the similarity of John's vision of Christ in Revelation, they do not seem to take notice of the differences in the details of their descriptions. So this person is immediately going to make an argument about the differences that we just read. In Revelation, describes Christ as dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet, whereas Daniel clearly states that he was able to see the man's arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze. Christ is not dressed in a manner which exposes that much of his body. In fact, Revelation states that only a visible part of Christ's legs were his feet, which were like bronze glowing in a furnace. On top of that, the word burnish indicates a finished work and means shining, polished bronze. However, John's description of Christ's feet glowing in a furnace indicates he is still directly connected to the heat source of the Creator, God, the Father, the master craftsman, and is therefore emitting the intense heat and brightness of an object still in a metalsmith hands within a furnace. That's his first argument. Number two, Daniel clearly states that the man had a belt of finest gold around his waist, whereas Christ is described with a golden sash around his chest. So he's saying that the two placement of the gold is different. The next undeniable difference is that the man in Daniel's vision had the voice like the sound of a multitude. And then he goes on to give some descriptions of how multitude is used throughout the Bible. And I'll leave a link to this in the description so that you can read line by line if you wish. Therefore, it can be safely assumed that Daniel meant when the angel spoke, his voice was like that of a great number of people. In comparison, Revelation John clearly states that Christ had a voice like the sound of rushing waters. This is clearly a very different voice than the one heard by Daniel. Before we go any further, I just want to say, if you guys ever watched the movie The Prince of Egypt, the animated film, I think they did a really good job when Moses speaks to the burning bush and you hear God's voice and you can hear the echoes in God's voice. I think that's essentially the closest thing, is that when he speaks, there's like a soft echo, and that echo you can say is like rushing waters. There's a multitude to it, and I think it's very beautiful. But let's continue. Lastly, although there's a similarity in the way the faces of both Christ and Daniel's vision are described, it is undeniable that the description of Christ yields a more intense picture than the angel described by Daniel. John describes Christ's face like the sunshine in all its brilliance, but Daniel describes the face of his vision as definitively having a face like lightning, right? Then he goes on to say that his vision, Daniel describes his vision as having eyes like flaming torches, whereas John is having eyes like blazing fire. So he's making the core argument that there are differences, even though there are similarities. There's differences, and I copied this chart into my presentation, which we'll look at. So his conclusion: it was an angel that Daniel witnessed, most likely of a high order, because the other two angels that appear on either side of him inquire of his knowledge in Daniel. John's vision of Christ dwarfs Daniel's vision when compared in intensity, and it is imperative to understand that when Daniel saw his vision, he stood gazing at this great vision, although he had no strength left, and his face turned deathly pale and was helpless. He also fell into a deep sleep, his face to the ground, when he listened to him. Whereas when John saw Christ, he fell at his feet as though dead. This difference in reaction must not be ignored. Daniel was able to stand before his vision, and although he felt helpless and turned pale, it was not until the vision spoke that his body was taken into a state of deep sleep with his face to the ground. Make no mistake, John felt as though dead at the very sight of Christ. Daniel did not see Christ, or his reaction would have no doubt been exactly the same upon merely viewing this being. So he's making the last argument that the intensity between the two, the angel and Christ, that the angel doesn't have as much power as Christ shows in Revelation. So this is the recap that he makes, and you can take a screenshot of this or just go to the link in the description if you want to take a look more closely. So he's just saying how there's similarities, and then also pointing out the differences in the placement of the items or the features. So how do we reconcile these changes, right? How do I reconcile these changes? So my argument is that this is pre versus post glorification of Christ. So let's look at the announcement of Jesus' reign. So in Daniel chapter 7, this is earlier in the book of Daniel, he says, I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, speaking about Christ, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. But notice he says here, coming with the clouds, right? And in Psalm 110, this is also an extension of this same vision in Psalm 110. Then the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. So Daniel, I believe, is seeing an extension of this announcement of Jesus' reign. So this is almost like a prophecy of when the reign would actually start to occur. So a key portion, and when this prophecy starts to be fulfilled, you can see in Acts. In chapter 1, verse 9, this is Jesus, this is what's occurring to Jesus. Now, when he had spoken these things, when Jesus had finished speaking, while they watched, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. You notice that a cloud came. And what we see in Daniel, when we start to see the reign of Christ, you see he's coming with the clouds and he's being presented to the Ancient of Days. And this is where all dominion and power and glory is being given to him. And this is when the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool, right? And then we see the final completion of this, where the confirmed completion of this is when Stephen is martyred. And Stephen sees the glorification of Jesus. So now in Acts chapter 7, but he, being Stephen, being full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God, and said, look, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. So in the Old Testament, you see the prophecy of this thing going to happen. In Acts, you see it play out. And in Stephen confirms it, right? So this is the pre-glorification. And then here, with Stephen in Acts, this is the post-glorification. So how do I reconcile this? This is holy drip. This is swag. I know this is not what you were expecting, but when you look at the changes here between the two, you see someone that went from one phase, right, to another phase. And this is Christ taking his essentially showing a transition that has occurred in heaven. And this is what I believe that we're seeing here. So in Daniel, we see, garments. Yeah, they're a little shorter. The bronze is nice. The golden belt around the waist, the voice. And then you see in Revelation, everything is amplified, right? That it's glowing red. The golden sashes around his chest now. The voice has been accentuated even more. Even the face, before it was like lightning, now it's like the sun, the brilliance of the sun. And yeah, it's like, why would God do this, right? Like, why would God go from one appearance or portray himself one way and then amplify that appearance? First of all, I want to start off by saying that some things we just need to give God, right? Let God have his thing. Like it says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God. Let him enjoy himself. He just came down and did a mighty work. He just saved us from all our sins. He died on the cross. Like when he came up, can you imagine the scene that occurred in heaven when he arrived in the clouds? And that's something I hope that he plays back for us, because that must have been one of the most glorious scenes ever in all of existence that has ever occurred. You imagine of course, he's going to put on new drapery. He's going to amplify himself in a way that has never been amplified or magnified in any way before or after, right? And that's what we're seeing in Revelation, this new magnified state. But wouldn't you do the same? If you were God, wouldn't you do the same, right? And I know from reading the scriptures that you look like, even looking like at the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is decked out in gold. Gold everywhere. The tabernacle, all of it. The tent, tables. He likes to look good. And he also likes to make his people look good. Remember when they were leaving Egypt? He was like, take the jewelry from the Egyptians. They're going to give you gifts. Take them. Like, he wants us to look good. And he also likes to look good. But wouldn't you do the same after everything that you went through? Like, let me put on some of this holy drip real quick. So my conclusion is, I believe that Jesus is the man in linen. Those 6 points To me, when I read it with fresh eyes, I was like, man, I can't believe I didn't see this earlier. It is the pre-incarnate Christ. So that is my conclusion. So my question for you is, do you agree or do you disagree? Leave a comment below. And remember, it took me a long time to make those AI photos. So I would really appreciate it if you can, subscribe, show me some support, like, comment, subscribe. I hope this video has been edifying for you. Remember, if you disagree with me, just, leave your thoughts below. It's okay for us to disagree. It's okay for us to not see eye to eye in every single thing. As long as we have the fundamentals down right, that's important. But I appreciate everyone's support. Thank you so much for your time. Again, my name is Oscar Chow, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. God bless.